I gave my wife everything she ever wanted, but she still chose my cousin. The day I found out, even my shadow felt heavy. I'm writing this at 3 a.m. on a Tuesday cause I can't sleep, and honestly I'm not sure I deserve to anymore. My name is Marcus, I'm 34 years old, and I destroyed my marriage with my own 2 hands. Not because my wife betrayed me first. Not because she wasn't enough. But because I couldn't look at what I had without wondering what else was out there. It started so small I almost didn't notice it was starting at all. Sarah and I had been married for 7 years. We have 2 kids, Emma who's 5 and Lucas who just turned 3. On paper my was everything I'd worked for. We bought a house in 2019, renovated ourselves, hung photos of our kids on every wall. Sarah stayed home to raise them. I built a career in software development that paid well enough to give her the financial security she'd always wanted. She got her dream kitchen. I got praised at work for being a dedicated family man. We look perfect in photos, but somewhere between the mortgage payments and the school runs and the endless cycle of diapers and work emails, I started feeling invisible. It wasn't Sarah's fault. She was exhausted, stretched thin between 2 kids under 6. She wanted me, but not the way she used to. The kind of want that meant dragging me into the bathroom at a party or leaving a note in my lunch. I missed that. I missed feeling like the person she chose, not just the person she was stuck with. And instead of telling her that, instead of being vulnerable about it, I started looking for it elsewhere. Her name was Jade. She worked at the coffee place near my office, the one I'd never visited before this particular Tuesday in March. She was 26, still figuring out her, had that kind of casual beauty that doesn't require trying. When she made my lat, she smiled like I was the first person to walk through that door all day. It was such a small thing, a smile, but I was starving for it. I told it was harmless. I started going there 3 times a week, then 5. Jade remembered my order. She remembered that I said I was a software developer. She asked me questions about my work like it was the most interesting thing she'd ever heard. We had conversations that lasted longer than they should have. She'd lean against the counter, and I'd stay on my side of it, keeping everything above the waist, above the belt, above the line I swore I wasn't crossing. But I was crossing it. Every single day I was crossing it. My buddy Derek noticed first. We grabbed lunch and I spent 40 minutes talking about how great the coffee was at this new place. How the vibe was different. How the girl who worked there was just really good at customer service. Derek looked at me like I'd grown a second head and said, "Dude," or describing a crush. I laughed it off. Told him he was paranoid. But I knew he was right, and that's when the real betrayal started, because I kept going anyway. I told I was just getting out of funk, that I need to feel desirable again, that a harmless flirtation with no physical contact was basically the same as fantasizing, and fantasizing was normal, right? Millions of people fantasized. This was nothing. Then one morning, I woke and couldn't remember what color Sarah's eyes were. I'm serious. I lay there in bed next to her, watching her sleep, and I couldn't immediately place whether they were green or blue. It took me a full 30 seconds of panic to remember green. They're green. The woman I promised to love for the rest of my. And I had to think for half a minute to remember her eye color, because my brain was so saturated with thoughts of someone else that I was crowding out the details of my actual wife. That should have been my wake call. That should have been the moment I stopped going to that coffee shop and started going to therapy. But instead I did what cowards do. I spiraled deeper. I started messaging Jade on Instagram. Nothing explicit, nothing I couldn't explain away. Just jokes about my day, memes I thought she'd like, questions about what she was doing. We texted about everything except the one thing that mattered, the fact that I was a married man with 2 small children and no business doing any of this. Sarah noticed my phone had become an extension of my hand. She didn't say anything, but I saw her see it. I watched her pretend not to care and I did nothing. My cousin James came to visit in June. He's always been the fun one, the one who talks louder and takes more space. He was crashing at our place for a few days, and Sarah was stressed about having the house perfect for him. I remember being annoyed at how much energy she was putting into it, like it mattered more than impressing me. That thought right there, that resentment, that was the rot speaking. That was the part of me that had already checked out. One night James and I went to grab drinks. Just us. I spent the entire time complaining about how Sarah didn't understand me anymore, about how she'd let herself go since having the kids, about how our had disappeared, about how I felt like I was drowning in responsibility and no one appreciated me for it. I made the victim of my own marriage. James listened. And then he did what good friends sometimes do. He told me the truth. He said, "Man, are describing a woman who gave her entire career to raise children, who turned house into a home, who is probably terrified that are already gone. And instead of talking to her like or punishing her for not being a 26-year-old who flirts with customers." He said some other things too, things about how I was being selfish, things that made me angry because they were right. I didn't listen. I drove home furious, not but at him for not understanding, at Sarah for driving me to this point, at the entire world for conspiring to make me feel like I was nothing. The next week I saw Jade at the coffee shop and asked her if she wanted out sometime, not as a date, just as friends. Just coffee outside of work. She said yes, and I felt like I'd been handed permission to everything down. We went to a park, we sat on a bench, and I told her things I should have only told Sarah or a therapist. I told her about my fears, my failures, my feeling of being trapped. She listened the way Jade had been listening all along, like I was interesting, like my problems were important, like I mattered. When I got home Sarah asked how my day was. I said it was fine. I didn't mention the park, I didn't mention Jade. Her forehead while she was loading the dishwasher, and I felt nothing. Not guilt yet, nothing, just absence. That's when everything changed. That's when my brother-in-law James's brother happened to see me and Jade at that park. He texted Sarah a photo without explanation. Just the image of me and a young woman sitting close on a bench, mid-conversation. I didn't know he'd seen us. I didn't know until Sarah asked me, very quietly, while the kids were napping, who that girl was. And I lied. I told her it was a coworker, that we were discussing a project, that there was nothing to worry about. Sarah looked at me like she was searching for the person she married and couldn't find him, but she didn't push. She just nodded and went back to whatever she was doing, and I watched her do it knowing I was erasing from her heart in real time. I told I'd stop. I told it had gone too far. And I meant it, I think. I genuinely meant it when I said those words in my head. But I didn't stop. Instead, I let it continue for 3 more months. 3 months of lies wrapped in normalcy. 3 months of kissing my wife while thinking about someone else. 3 months of reading bedtime stories to my kids while my phone buzzed with messages that made my heart race. 3 months of becoming a shell of a person, so focused on maintaining the illusion that I forgot I was supposed to actually lie. And then, one Thursday morning in September, everything broke apart. Sarah's friend was at our house for coffee. I was working from home that day, and as I walked past the living room to grab something from my office, Sarah's friend's daughter, who was maybe 7 years old, asked me a question. "Mr. Marcus, do you have a girlfriend? Because yesterday I saw at the park holding hands with someone who wasn't mommy." Time stopped. Actually stopped. I felt like I was underwater. Sarah looked. Sarah's friend looked. And in that moment, watching my wife's face change from confusion to understanding to something that looked a lot like desperation, I realized I hadn't actually hidden anything at all. I'd just been skilled at not seeing my own behavior clearly. Sarah asked me to go to my office. She wanted to talk later away from the kids and her friend. And I did, but not before watching her excuse herself to the bathroom and seeing her come back with red eyes and the kind of composure that only comes from someone who has just finished crying and is forcing themselves to hold it together. I sat in my office for 6 hours. Just sat there. Didn't work. Didn't text Jade. Didn't do anything but exist in the space between who I was pretending to be and who I actually was. When Sarah came to find me that evening, after the kids were in bed, she had her phone in her hand. She didn't yell. She didn't cry. She just opened her photos and showed me screenshots of every single message between me and Jade, every single one. Her friend had been suspicious after that park encounter, had followed me one day. She'd seen everything and reported back. Sarah had been gathering evidence quietly for weeks, hoping I would come clean. I hadn't. She told me that I needed to leave. Not divorce, she didn't say that word. Just leave. She said she loved me but couldn't live with me. She said she had to protect the kids from watching their father choose someone else while they slept 10 feet away. She said she deserved a husband who wanted to be her husband, and I wasn't that person. I moved into an apartment that weekend. I told my boss I needed personal time. I blocked Jade on every platform and never contacted her again. But none of that mattered because the damage was done. What broke me was not the divorce papers or the custody arrangements or the humiliation of having to tell my parents that I'd blown my marriage. What broke me was the look on Emma's face when I picked her for my first visitation day and she asked me why Daddy wasn't living at home anymore. She was 5 years old, and I had to find a way to explain betrayal to a child. I told her Daddy had made some bad choices. That had nothing to do with her or Lucas. That I still loved her very much. But what I couldn't tell her was why I'd made those choices, because I still don't have an answer that doesn't sound like an excuse. Sarah moved on faster than I expected. She got into therapy, started working part-time at a marketing firm, lost weight without trying because stress does that sometimes. She looked lighter, freer. And I knew it was because she'd been carrying me like a weight for so long that removing me had felt like relief instead of heartbreak. I am alone now in a way I never was when I was married. When married, even a bad marriage, there's someone there. Someone who knows day. Someone who might love despite failures. Sarah had been that person, and I had spent 7 years treating her like she was the obstacle to my happiness instead of the source of it. I think about Jade sometimes, and I her a little bit, which is unfair because the only thing she did wrong was be young and available when I was looking to feel alive. The real villain here was me, and I've had to learn to live with that fact in a way that doesn't destroy me completely. The worst part, the part that keeps me at night, is knowing that I can't go back. I can't undo the day that 7-year-old girl asked me if I had a girlfriend. I can't make Sarah trust me again. I can't give Emma and Lucas the intact family they deserved. I can't even make the person I was before I started going to that coffee shop, because that person didn't exist either. He was just better at hiding. Every man who reads this thinks it won't be him. I thought that too. It's been 14 months since I moved out. 14 months of learning what it means to lose everything thought you built. I don't recognize anymore, and I'm not sure that's a bad thing. The divorce was finalized in March. I won't bore with the details of the legal process cause honestly it's all a blur. What I will tell is that Sarah's lawyer was ruthless in a way that felt completely justified. She wanted to make sure I couldn't Sarah again, not financially anyway. 50-50 custody on paper, but I pay for everything: childcare, medical expenses, half the mortgage on the house I no longer live in, support that will continue until Lucas turns 18. Sarah also got the house. I essentially paid for a home that another man will probably be sleeping in by next year. I deserve that. I know I deserve that. But knowing deserve something and living with the reality of it are two completely different things. I live in a 1-bedroom apartment on the south side of the city now. It's the kind of place that smells like old carpet and broken dreams, which is fitting cause that's exactly what I am. The walls are thin enough that I can hear my neighbors' arguments, their crying, their eventual makeup. I lie in bed and listen to their play out and think about how lucky they are to still have someone to with. To still have skin in the game. I have walls between me and everything now, and they're all of my own making. My job didn't survive the fallout either. Not officially, but the vibe at work changed fundamentally after the news started spreading. And the news did spread. When a married man with kids and marriage for a 26-year-old barista people talk. My boss heard about it, my team heard about it. Within 2 weeks, a company-wide memo came out about workplace conduct and professional reputation, and everyone knew it was directed at me. I wasn't fired, I was too valuable as a developer for that. But I was sidelined, taken off client-facing projects. Moved back and work on systems nobody cared about. My manager, who'd always praised my work ethic, started including comments in my reviews about maturity and trustworthiness. A promotion I'd been promised before the scandal was quietly given to a younger guy named Tyler. I actually trained Tyler on the project. The humiliation of watching him get the advancement I'd been working toward for 2 years, while I remained in place, was something I had to swallow along with my coffee every single morning. I started applying to other jobs within 3 months. Turns out, when Google own name now, there are articles about. Nothing formal, just Reddit threads and blog posts from people in tech communities talking about The guy who destroyed his marriage for a barista. Screenshots of my LinkedIn were shared. Someone found old tweets where I talked about being a devoted family man and devoted themselves to pointing out the hypocrisy. I got 3 job offers, all from smaller companies in smaller cities, all at significant pay cuts. I took one, a remote position with a firm in Portland that didn't do as much background checking. It pays 40% less than what I was making before. 40% less. My apartment costs are higher than they were supposed to because I can't commute anymore. I'm still paying for a house I don't live in. I'm still paying for my kids' lives, which I should be, which I want to be, but the math doesn't work. By the end of each month I have maybe $200 in my account before it cycles. I've started eating off-brand cereal and thinking carefully about whether I can afford to gas my car. This is the part nobody talks about when they talk about consequences. They're not clean and temporary. They compound, they spiral. One bad decision doesn't just cost one thing, it costs everything connected to that thing. But the financial devastation as it is, isn't even close to the worst part. The worst part is my kids. Emma used to run to the door when she heard my car pull. Now she asks her mom if she has to go with me. I don't think she's doing it to me. I think she genuinely doesn't know me anymore. In her mind I'm the man who left. The reasons why don't matter to a 6-year-old. Just the fact that I chose somewhere else, someone else, and now she's confused about whether that meant I chose not to be with her. I've been doing therapy for 8 months. My therapist, a woman named Dr. Mitchell who charges $150 an hour and who I can barely afford, keeps asking me to sit with Emma's confusion without trying to fix it. She says that Emma needs to learn that people can make mistakes and still love their children, that failure isn't the same as not loving her. But how do I teach her that I don't believe it about? Last month, Emma started having nightmares. Not about me specifically, but about abandonment. She dreams that her mom is gone and she can't find her. Sarah told me about it during a custody exchange in the parking lot of a McDonald's, our court-mandated neutral location. Emma was in the car, and Sarah was making sure I didn't try to extend my time or make a scene. She said Emma wakes screaming and won't go back to sleep until Sarah promises she's not going anywhere. I caused that. My choices, my inability to keep my marriage together, my betrayal of Sarah, it all trickled down into my daughter's unconscious mind and now she's terrified of loss. Lucas is too young to understand what's happening, which is somehow worse. He just knows that daddy doesn't live at home anymore. He calls me, visit man, which what Emma used to call the man who came to fix the furnace. He asks Sarah when I'm coming and she tells him, and then he forgets, and then he asks again. I've started taking photos and videos at every visit so I can send them to him during the week, trying to keep relevant in his memory. He's 3 years old. I should be teaching him to read, not trying to make sure he doesn't forget my face. The co-parenting with Sarah is polite but devastating. We communicate through a parenting app now, something the divorce agreement mandated. We don't text. We don't call unless it's an emergency. Everything is documented, time-stamped, witnessed by the algorithm. I see her at exchanges and she looks like she's moved past me and I'm glad and it. She started dating someone I think. There's a man's name in some of the photos she posts on Instagram. I know this. I can't stop looking. His name is David. He's a lawyer. Sarah's friend from her yoga class told my sister who told me. David appears in photos with Sarah's arm around him, both of them smiling with a kind of comfort that I never made her feel. Not because he's better than me, but because he's not me. He doesn't have a history of lying. He doesn't have a pattern of choosing himself first. He's not someone who destroyed her trust and then expects her to rebuild it for his sake. I know I shouldn't care who Sarah dates. I forfeited that right the moment I started messaging Jade. But watching someone else make my wife happy, watching someone else play the role in her that I was supposed to play, it's a particular kind of that nobody prepares for. I wasn't just kicked out of my marriage, I was replaced. And the man who replaced me didn't have to do anything except show and not betray her. The real kicker came last month when Emma asked if David was going to be her new dad. She didn't ask it with anger or sadness. She asked it like she was asking about the weather. Just a matter of fact question about whether this man who was now spending time at her mom's house, who was helping her with her homework and going to her soccer games, was a permanent fixture. And I realized in that moment that I had already been replaced as a father, not because anyone told me to leave, but because I made irrelevant through my own choices. I told Emma that David wasn't her new dad, that I was still her dad. But she looked confused, like she was trying to remember what that meant. I think I broke something in her that day. Or maybe I just made visible something that had already been breaking. The social consequences have been almost as brutal as the personal ones. My parents won't even look at me. They still love me, I think, but there's a disappointment in them now that's replaced everything else. My mother used to brag to her friends about what a devoted father I was. She'd show photos of our family vacations, talk about how Sarah and I had such a strong marriage. Now she doesn't mention me at all. My dad told me once and only once, that I was the kind of man he'd raised me not to be. I haven't heard from him since. My friendship group imploded. Derek was the first to distance himself. He said he couldn't respect me anymore, and I deserved that assessment. Others followed. Some because they believed I was a bad person. Others because they couldn't be friends with someone who'd betrayed his family, and had the audacity to still exist in the social circles we'd shared. Dinners I'd been invited to suddenly had no room for me. Guys I'd worked with for years deleted me from group chats. I went to a high school reunion last fall, and the second I walked in, I felt like a ghost walking through the world of living people. I tried explaining to people. I don't recommend that. Explanations just sound like excuses, and people are much less forgiving when you're asking them to understand selfishness. It's easier to forgive someone who's at least willing to shut and take what they deserve. The worst was running into Jade at the grocery store. 6 months after everything fell apart, I'm in the produce section, and there she is, putting apples in a bag. She looked beautiful in the way she always had, but now she also looked uncomfortable when she saw me. We did that awkward thing where we both tried to leave in opposite directions and ended in a weird dance. Finally I just nodded at her and moved past, but not before I saw her relief. Not before I understood that I had infected her with my selfishness too, and now she had to feel uncomfortable buying groceries in the same store where I shopped. I wanted to apologize to her, but what would I say? Sorry for derailing by making a symbol of my self-destruction. The truth is I have no right to clear my conscience with her. That's not something I get to do. I have to live with the fact that I involved an innocent person in my betrayal, and then abandoned her without explanation the moment my fell apart. I started going to support groups. Meetings for men who've destroyed their marriages. There are more of us than think. Rooms full of men sitting in folding chairs, talking about their decisions, their regrets, their children who don't know them anymore. We don't offer solutions because there aren't any. We just sit in our collective failure and acknowledge that we did this to ourselves. Some guys are further along than I am. They're divorced 5 years and have rebuilt some kind of relationship with their kids. They tell me it gets easier. I don't know if I believe them, but I go anyway because at least there I don't have to pretend I'm better than I am. The thing that haunts me most is knowing that I could have just talked to Sarah. That's the part that keeps me at night. Not the money, not the logistics, not even the custody arrangement. Just the knowledge that if I had looked at my wife and said, I'm struggling. I feel invisible. I need help. She probably would have gone to therapy with me. She probably would have fought for me. But I didn't give her that chance. I chose to against her instead. I see photos of Sarah and David on Facebook sometimes. They look happy. Real happy. Not the performed happiness of people trying to hold together something broken. And the thing is I'm glad. Not because I'm strong enough to be genuinely happy for her. But because seeing her happy is the only way I can partially absolve of knowing that I made her miserable for so long. Emma has stopped asking why I don't live at home anymore. She's accepted it as normal now. That might be the saddest thing that's happened in all of this. She's accepted my absence. She's built it that doesn't include me as a daily presence, and I can't blame her. I did that. I taught her that it was okay to have a father who was never reliably there, never prioritized being present, never made her feel like she mattered more than my own needs. I make decent money now, enough to survive, not enough to feel secure. I call the kids once a week, on Tuesday evenings, and most of the time Emma doesn't have much to say and Lucas doesn't understand what a phone call is. I see them every other weekend, and we do normal things, go to movies, eat pizza, go to parks. But there's a stiffness between us now that wasn't there before. I'm not their dad anymore in the way that matters. I'm the man they have to spend time with because the court said so. Sometimes I'll see families at the park, fathers playing with their kids, completely present and unhurried. And I have to leave because the resentment and regret are too much. I resent them for having what I weigh. I resent for throwing it away. And I resent the entire universe for the fact that none of that resentment changes anything. The hardest part of all of this is that I can see exactly where the turning points were. I can see the moment in the coffee shop when I should have just gone somewhere else. I can see the week I should have talked to Sarah instead of Jade. I can see the day I should have blocked her number before things went too far. I can see all of it so clearly now, like I'm watching someone else's choices from the outside. But that clarity doesn't matter because it comes too late. I am 35 years old. I have been divorced for 14 months. I have seen my marriage destroyed, my career sidelined, my friendships evaporated, and my children grow distant in a way that they shouldn't have to. I have money in my checking account that won't last until the end of the week. I have an apartment that smells like other people's mistakes. I have a job that pays me less than I'm worth, because I'm unhorrible anywhere else. I have every other weekend with kids who are learning to live without me. And the worst part is that I know some man reading this right now is thinking about texting that girl from his office back. He's thinking about how his wife doesn't understand him. He's thinking that one conversation, one exchange, one meeting for coffee is harmless. He's thinking that he deserves to feel alive again, even if it means lying to the person who gave him everything. I want to reach through this screen and grab him by the shoulders and tell him that he's not special. That his situation is not unique. That his justifications are the same ones thousands of men have used. That his wife probably knows something is wrong, and is trying to hold on while he's trying to leave. That his kids will remember this. That he will lose things he didn't even know he could lose until they're gone. But he won't listen, because I didn't listen either. Because none of us believe we're the cautionary tale until we become it. 2 years, that's how long it's been since Sarah asked me to leave. 24 months of waking in an apartment that still doesn't feel like home. 24 months of being the guy who had everything and it away. 24 months of learning what it means to become invisible. I'm 36 now. I don't know how that happened. Time moves differently when we're alone. Days blur into each other. Weekends with the kids break the monotony but also reinforce the reality they're fine without me. More than fine, they're thriving. Emma's in first grade now, making straight A's, has a best friend named Sophie, loves soccer. She has a stability I was never able to give her. Lucas is 4 and barely remembers the time I lived in the house. In his mind this is just how it's always been. Mom's house is home, and Dad's apartment is where go on certain days. He calls it Dad's visiting place. I don't correct him. The strange thing about being a divorced father who sees his kids every other weekend is that become a performance. Become scheduled. Stop being the boring constant in their lives and start being the event. Or not the person who helps with homework or makes breakfast or handles the mundane crisis. We're the guy who does something fun and then gives them back. Emma's old enough to notice the difference now. She's pointed out, in that way kids have of being brutally honest, that I'm not really a parent anymore. I'm more like a friend of the family. That was about a month ago. She was eating pizza at our favorite place, and she casually mentioned that David came to her school assembly. That David helped her with her science project. That David knows all her friends' names. And then she looked at me and asked very matter-of-factly, why I never came to anything. And I couldn't tell her it was because I was too fractured to plan anything more than a pizza date. I couldn't tell her I was barely holding together. So I just smiled and told her that I was proud of her and that I loved her, which are both true things that don't actually answer the question she was asking. The thing about losing family is that nobody really sees after it happens. I'll walk into a store or a restaurant, and people look right through me. I'm not the kind of man who matters anymore. I'm not the guy with the wife and the kids and the suburban dream. I'm just a man, alone, existing in a way that most people don't register. I'm invisible, which is what I wanted all along, I guess. I wanted to feel alive. I got invisibility instead. My therapist says I'm in depression that's been deepening for about 6 months. She uses clinical language, talks about persistent low mood and anhedonia, which is a fancy way of saying nothing brings me joy anymore. I go to work, I do my job, I come home. I see my kids every other weekend. I go to my support group on Thursday nights. I exist, but none of it feels real. None of it feels like it matters. I look in the mirror sometimes and I'm not sure who I'm looking at. The drinking started around month 18. Not heavily at first, just after work. Then 2. Then on nights when I couldn't sleep. I'm not I tell. I don't have the physical shakes or the lost jobs or the missed custody days. But I also can't remember the last time I didn't have in my system. I can't remember the last time I felt anything without numbing it first. My therapist asked me about it last week, and I lied and said I was only drinking socially. She didn't believe me. The loneliness is something I wasn't prepared for. I thought I wanted to be alone. I thought that solitude was what I was searching for when I was messaging Jade, when I was sitting on that park bench, when I was lying to my wife. But this kind of alone is not what I thought it would be. This is a tomb of silence. This is the sound of my own thoughts on repeat, telling me how badly I've everything. This is opening my phone and seeing that I have no one to call. This is lying awake at 3 in the morning, and understanding that the person I destroyed the most trust with was the only person who could have saved me from this. I ran into my cousin James last year at a gas station. First time I'd seen him since that night we went for drinks, since he told me the truth and I drove home angry. He looked surprised to see me, then his expression shifted into something that looked a lot like pity. We didn't hug, we just nodded at each other. But then he asked, "How are the kids?" And something about the way he asked it, the genuine concern in his voice, broke something in me right there in the middle of a gas station. I told him they were good. That Emma was thriving. That Lucas was becoming his own little person. And then I said, "I'm not doing great," which might be the most honest thing I've said to anyone in months. James offered to grab coffee. I almost said no, but I was so desperate for a conversation with someone who wasn't a stranger or a therapist that I agreed. We sat in a booth at a diner, and he told me he'd heard about my situation from my sister. He said Sarah seemed happy now. He said he'd run into her at the grocery store with David and she looked lighter. He didn't say it to me, he was just being honest. But anyway. Then he said something that stuck with me. No, that night we went out for drinks. I told the truth because I was trying to save. I was trying to get to wake before it destroyed everything. And I thought listened. I thought maybe go home and have a real conversation with wife. But didn't, doubled down. And now I watch destroy and I can't help anymore. I can't fix this. Nobody can. I asked him why he was telling me this. If he just wanted to tell me I already knew that. He said he wasn't trying to be cruel. He was trying to tell me that I had a chance to do the right thing and I choose not to. That I had people around me who cared enough to tell me I was about to make a massive mistake, and I ignored them. And now I had to live with the consequences of that choice. Not because the universe was punishing me, but because actions have natural consequences. He tried to warn me. He failed. And now here I was alone, and that was on me. I haven't seen James since. But I think about that conversation constantly, because he was right. Everyone was right. My sister, my friends, Sarah herself when she looked at my phone and saw the evidence of my betrayal. Everyone who cared about me was trying to tell me something, and I was too busy feeling sorry for to listen. That's the part nobody talks about. Not the divorce, not the custody arrangements, not even the loss of family. Nobody talks about the specific kind of it is to know that did this too. That we're warned. That there was a moment when could have chosen differently, and chose this instead. I tried contacting Sarah about 6 months ago. Nothing dramatic, just a text saying that I was sorry. That I knew sorry didn't fix anything, but I wanted her to know that I understood what I'd done and that it wasn't her fault. That she was a good wife and that I was a bad husband and that none of what happened was because she wasn't enough. I needed her to know for some reason. Maybe for my own peace of mind. Maybe because I thought absolution from her would make the weight lighter. She didn't respond for 3 days, then she sent back a single message, "Thank for saying that. But I need to understand something. Didn't me because we're a bad husband, me because we're a coward, and I've made peace with that. I've forgiven cause holding on to anger was but need to forgive, not for my sake, but for own. Because right now, are still choosing to punish, and that's just another way of making this about instead of about what's best for Emma and Lucas." She was right of course. Even now 2 years out I'm still centering. I'm still the victim of my own story. I'm still the person suffering the most, when the reality is that Emma and Lucas are the ones who will carry this for the rest of their lives. My daughter will probably have trust issues with men. My son will probably have an ambiguous relationship with the concept of fatherhood. And I did that. Not because I had to, but because I wanted to feel alive in the moment and couldn't be bothered to consider the long-term cost. Last month, I picked Emma and Lucas, and we went to the park like we always do. Emma was on the bars with her friend Sophie, and Lucas was in the sandbox doing something with buckets. I was sitting on a bench watching them, and a man next to me started a conversation. He had a kid there too, and he was telling me about how exhausted he was, how his wife had been on his case about him being on his phone too much, how he felt like he wasn't appreciated for all the work he did. I listened to him talk for about 5 minutes, and then I told him something I should have told years ago. Have no idea how good have it. Have a wife who cares enough about behavior to call out. Have kids who are there every single day. Are sitting here complaining about not feeling appreciated, but are still there. Are still choosing to be there. Don't that, because once do there's no getting it back. He looked at me like I was crazy. He probably thought I was some kind of street preacher trying to interfere in his. But I didn't care. I needed to say it, I needed someone to hear it. I needed to believe that maybe, if enough men heard this, some of them would make different choices than I did. I don't know if he listened. Most people don't. Most people think the cautionary tale is happening to someone else. The physical toll has been real too. I've aged about 5 years in the last 2. I have gray hair now in my beard. I have bags under my eyes that don't go away. I've lost weight because eating alone feels pointless. I don't sleep well. I get maybe 5 hours a night, and most of it is disturbed by dreams where I'm looking for my kids and can't find them. I had a health scare last year where I thought I was having a heart. Turned out to be a panic, which the doctor said was a symptom of ongoing trauma and unresolved anxiety. I'm 36 years old and my body is responding to my like I'm 50. The worst night was a few months ago. I had Emma and Lucas for the weekend and they were supposed to stay Saturday and Sunday night. But Saturday morning, Emma woke and asked if she could go back to mom's house. She said her stomach didn't feel good. I checked and she didn't have a fever. No obvious signs of illness. But I knew what was happening. She didn't want to be there. Being with me was starting to feel like an obligation instead of something she wanted to do. I called Sarah and told her I wanted to come home. Sarah asked if everything was okay, and I said yes, that Emma just wasn't feeling well. Sarah came to pick her about an hour later. As I was putting Emma's things back in her backpack, she hugged me and told me she loved me. And I knew she meant it, but I also knew that she was relieved to be leaving. Lucas stayed through Sunday. We watched movies and ate pizza and played in the park. But the whole time I was aware that I was the uncle now, not really the dad. I was the guy who does things on weekends. I was not the person he turned to when he was scared or sad or just needed a parent. That person was Sarah. David could probably handle that role better than I could now. When Sarah picked him Sunday evening, she asked if I was okay. I told her I was fine. She didn't believe me, but she didn't push. We've learned to keep things cordial at this point. Anything more honest would be too much for both of us to handle. I've started keeping a journal. Not for therapy, my therapist suggested it, but I stopped going to therapy about 3 months ago. It got too expensive and too depressing. In the journal, I write down moments from my marriage that I can still remember clearly. The day I proposed to Sarah, how she cried happy tears and said yes before I even finished asking the question. The day Emma was born, how terrified I was and how Sarah held my hand and told me we were going to do great. The Christmas we spent in Mexico with just the two of us before we had kids. How we made love on the beach and didn't care who saw us. Reading those entries is painful. They remind me of who I was when I was choosing Sarah. They remind me of how easy it would have been to just keep choosing her. But I didn't. I chose the feeling of being alive over the reality of being chosen. And now I'm stuck with memories and regret and a future that stretches ahead of me with no one in it. I think about Jade sometimes and I hope she's moved on. I hope she never thinks about me or the older married man who flirted with her in a coffee shop. I hope she found someone her own age who could love her without destroying her in the process. I don't have any right to that hope, but I have it anyway. I think about Sarah almost every day. I watch her happen through social media and occasionally through my sister's updates. She got a promotion at work. She and David went on a vacation. They look happy in the photos. Real happy. And I'm glad. I am genuinely glad that she found someone who can be present in a way that I couldn't. But I'm also stuck in this weird limbo where I'm not grieving her anymore. But I'm not at peace with losing her either. I'm just stuck. The support group I used to go to, I stopped showing about 6 months ago. Not because I got better, but because listening to other men's stories was starting to feel like I was living the same failure over and over. And I was afraid that if I kept going, I would start believing that this was just how it was. That some men were just destined to destroy their families. That there was no coming back from this. That I would spend the rest of my as a cautionary tale, and eventually I would just accept it. Maybe I've already accepted it. I don't know anymore. What I do know is that I'm not the man I was when this started. I'm not the man who felt invisible in his marriage. I'm not the man who thought he deserved to feel alive, even at the cost of destroying other people's lives. I'm also not a redeemed version of. I'm just broken in a specific way that I've had to learn to live with. Every other weekend, I pick my kids from a house that used to be mine. I take them to places. I feed them. I listen to them talk about their week. And then I drop them off and come home to an apartment that smells like regret. And I do it all over again the next time. I don't feel like a father anymore. I feel like a man who had a family once and it so badly that the only thing left is the logistics of fatherhood without the actual relationship. Emma will eventually stop coming altogether, probably around age 14 when kids get to choose. Lucas might remember me as a peripheral figure, a man who took him to parks and bought him pizza, but not someone who really knew him or loved him in the way that matters. And the cruelest part is knowing that I could have prevented all of this. All of it, if I had just talked to my wife. If I had just stopped going to that coffee shop. If I had just been honest instead of choosing to live in a lie. If I had just valued what I had instead of always looking for something better. There's a moment in every man's where he has to choose between the familiar pain of his actual, and the exotic appeal of something that feels new. That moment is a test. It's the universe asking him, who are someone who keeps his promises or someone who keeps his options open? Are someone who grows and figures out how to be happy with what he has, or someone who chases the feeling of newness forever? I failed that test, and I've been living with the consequences ever since. The real kicker is that I still don't have a good answer for why I did it. That's what kills me the most. If I could point to something, some concrete reason, some trauma that made me do this, I could at least frame it as a reaction to something. But the truth is that I did it because I wanted to. Because I was bored and unhappy, and instead of being about my unhappiness, I chose to betray the person who loved me most. That's all it was. A choice, a series of choices. Every single day. The choice to go back to that coffee shop. The choice to message Jade. The choice to meet her. The choice to lie to my wife. The choice to keep lying. The choice to not stop until everything burned down. I made all of those choices. And I have to live with every single one of them. 2 years, and I'm still waiting for it to get better. My therapist said it takes time. My support group said it takes acceptance. James said it takes nothing except learning to live with consequences. They're all probably right in their own ways. But what I've learned is that some things can't fix. Some broken things have to stay broken. Some families that were whole have to stay fractured. Some people who loved have to learn to live without. And some men have to learn to live as ghosts in the lives of their own children. I gave my wife everything she ever wanted: a home, security, children, stability, and she still chose to leave me. Not because she found someone better, but because she finally understood that staying with me was choosing to live with someone who couldn't be trusted. Someone who had already shown her that his own feelings mattered more than her feelings. Someone who had already made the calculation that his moment of feeling alive was worth the price of her heartbreak. The day I found out she was moving on, even my shadow felt heavy. Because shadows are supposed to follow. They're supposed to be loyal. They're supposed to stay with no matter what, and mine wanted to leave.